So here's a question for you. How much does the actual physical map of the world still shape war and politics? I mean, really dictate things, even now with all our technology.
That's a really good question. It feels uh, incredibly relevant right now, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
makes you wonder if we've really escaped the past.
Exactly. Are nations still sort of imprisoned by their geography, or has tech given us the key?
Well, that's what we want to dig into today.
Right. We're doing a deep dive into geography's stubborn grip on global affairs. And we've got a really stark current example to look at, the Israel-US versus Iran conflict that's been unfolding, well, basically right now in June 2025.
It's a powerful case study
Mm,
because even with stealth jets, cyber attacks, all
yeah.
of that, mountains, seas, narrow borders, they're still massively important. They still, call a lot of the shots.
Definitely. And the book we're really leaning on for the framework here is Tim Marshall's Prisoners of Geography. It's a fantastic read if you haven't checked it out.
Mhm. His core idea is pretty compelling. That the landscape, mountains, rivers, sea access, or the lack of good borders acts almost like a prison. It shapes national strategy, he argues, often more than big ideas or even money.
He gives great examples, like the Himalayas basically walling off India from China for centuries.
Exactly, a massive natural barrier.
So our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the key insights from Marshall's thinking and also from the detailed reports we have on this 2025 conflict. We want to show you how geography is really underpinning these huge strategic moves, even while technology is obviously, evolving like crazy.
Yeah, connecting those dots between the ancient lay of the land and, well, 21st century warfare. You might see the news differently afterwards.
Let's hope so. Okay, so let's get into it. Marshall's big picture ideas, how are they showing up right now in this specific conflict?
Well, it's almost textbook, isn't it?
Yeah.
He talks a lot about how geography doesn't just nudge things along, it often sets the whole stage, especially in the Middle East, which gets a whole chapter in his book.
And it's not just the obvious things like mountains, is it? He also talks about how deserts push people to coasts, or how these straight lines drawn on maps, the artificial borders, cause endless friction.
Right, creating alliances and also fault lines for proxy wars. And then there's the actual terrain itself.
Mhm.
Think about Iran. Huge, rugged, mountainous interior. Contract that with Israel, incredibly narrow.
Tiny, yeah.
That basic difference, Marshall shows, forces completely different ways of thinking strategically. And of course, you can't talk about the region without mentioning oil and those critical sea lanes, those choke points like Hormuz.
Okay, let's link that directly to 2025, Iran's mountains. You mentioned them. How did that play out?
It's a perfect illustration. Marshall explains how that kind of terrain makes traditional ground invasion a nightmare. It's difficult, it's slow, it's costly in lives and equipment.
So it almost forces your hand.
Precisely. It forces the attacker's hand, pushing them towards technology to overcome the terrain advantage. We saw that, didn't we, with Operation Rising Lion on June 13th.
Yeah, the Israeli operation.
The geography basically screamed, don't try to walk in here, fly over, or hack in. So Israel went for this massive, coordinated air and cyber attack. They didn't even really consider a major ground push initially.
Right, they used F-35s for stealth penetration, F-16s, F-15s for the heavy lifting with bombs, plus drones hitting dozens of Iranian missile sites.
Over 70 SAM sites, yeah. The goal was clear. Take out the air defenses, gain control of the skies, partly because the ground was so forbidding, they used cyber and electronic warfare alongside the bombs. It's modern tech directly answering an ancient geographic challenge.
Which brings us to Israel's side of the equation. Marshall really emphasizes their lack of strategic depth, that narrowness.
Critically important. Their whole doctrine of preemptive strikes, their reliance on things like Iron Dome and advanced
Right.
air power, it's not just about having the tech. It's driven by the geographic reality that they have almost no room to absorb a blow. There's no buffer zone.
So geography essentially mandates a quick, decisive, often high-tech response.
I think that's fair to say, yes. They feel they have to strike first and hard because they can't trade space for time.
In that context helps explain the U.S. stepping in more forcefully too, right? By June 21st, they were hitting Iranian nuclear sites. President Trump announced it as a major success.
Mm-hmm. And the talk of potentially using massive bunker buster bombs, like that 15-ton one, for hardened targets like Fordo, plus positioning B-2 stealth bombers within range,
At Diego Garcia, yeah.
it all points to the same challenge. Iran uses its geography, its vastness, its mountains, to bury and protect its sensitive sites. So the U.S. response also becomes technologically driven, designed to overcome that geographic defense.
Okay, what about the sea, the Strait of Hormuz? Marshall calls it the choke point.
He does. And it sounds almost like a cliche because we hear it so much, but this conflict shows why. It's a harsh reality. The U.S. and Israeli strikes, even if they didn't immediately cause a global crash, instantly highlighted how vulnerable the world oil supply is.
Just the threat is enough to make markets jittery.
Exactly. That narrow strip of water still holds incredible leverage over the global economy. Geography holding the system hostage, in a way.
And Iran's reaction, launching over 1,400 missiles and drones threatening U.S. forces, shows how quickly this escalates regionally.
Which loops back to another of Marshall's points. Those artificial borders and proxy warfare.
Right. He talks about Sykes-Picot, those lines drawn after World War I.
Yes, lines that cut across ethnic groups, religious groups, ignored traditional boundaries. And look at Iran's network. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq and Syria. Their reach is enabled, in part, by the instability baked into those colonial-era borders.
So these old map lines are still fueling conflict today, providing the channels for these proxy fights to flare up across multiple fronts.
It's a really clear, if tragic, illustration of his point. Human decisions interacting with geography, creating long-lasting instability.
So bringing this all together, what's the main takeaway for you, the listener, watching all this unfold?
I think it's that the tools change dramatically, but the playing field, the physical geography, still exerts this enormous constant pressure. Technology modifies how nations deal with mountains or narrow coastlines, but it doesn't just erase their importance.
So this idea of geopolitical determinism, that geography heavily shapes destiny, it still has legs.
I'd say it has significant weight, yeah. It doesn't mean leaders have no choices, but geography severely limits the options, or makes certain choices far more likely. Israel, lacking depth, leans on tech and preemption. Iran uses its terrain for defense, forcing attackers towards air and cyber. It's a pattern.
It really highlights Marshall's idea, maybe paraphrasing a bit, that geography kind of sets the rug in the room.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
But it's human decisions, technology, ideology that arrange the furniture on that rug. Tech is a crucial supplement here, maybe even an amplifier, but it's not replacing the geographic foundation.
Well said. It's this constant interplay, this dance between the unchanging land and our changing capabilities.
And the ripple effects are huge. We see oil markets reacting, diplomatic efforts stalling, people being evacuated across the region, all stemming from strategic choices deeply conditioned by geography.
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with, building on Marshall. If today's geography still holds so much sway, what happens as climate change really starts to bite? Marshall touches on things like new Arctic sea routes opening up as ice melts.
That's a huge question.
Right. How will that redraw the map? Will it force nations to rethink these geographic prisons? What new choke points or maybe new strategic opportunities will emerge? And how will we, human agency, respond to those new geographic facts?
A lot to think about for the coming decades. The map isn't static, even the physical one, when you factor in climate.
Definitely something to mull over.